Hi, everyone. I'm Yann Ilunga. I'm a podcasting and lead generation consultant. I've been podcasting since 2014. I'm an international speaker. And if you've watched these videos before, you should know who's right here with me, my partner.
Hi, everyone. And I am Connie Steele. I'm an author, an executive consultant, a business strategist, and marketer. I've spent much of my career in the technology space across Fortune 500, mid-sized companies, and even startups. And I am a podcaster myself, as I mentioned. I'm the host of a Silicon Valley-based podcast. I am the creator and host of my own podcast as well, where I focus on helping the next generation of leaders understand the business of work.
Busy. And Connie, you're a podcast guest as well. And I think one of the key factors when it comes to generating demand, well, it's through podcasting in our context, but it could be through any type of medium or type of content, is conversion. So how do we get, in our case, listeners to take the steps we would want them to take? So I thought it would make sense for the two of us to talk about that a little bit further. First, I want to ask you a question, Connie, since you are a podcast host, a podcast guest, a podcast listener. For you, when you're thinking about, let's say, when you're a listener for a change, because often during our conversations, we have talked about when the two of us are hosts or we're guests. Let's talk about when you are a listener. When you hear a call to action, it could be about any type of podcast. When would you say a call to action is affecting? Meaning they mention something, perhaps it's a link to a webpage, and you say, oh, I want to go and check it out.
Well, I usually take action when there's very clear value, right? It gives me more specifics on how to approach something. I think all of us in, our jobs and our lives, many times understand what the problem may be. But when we have a unique perspective or a valuable perspective in how to go about solving what that challenge may be, and if there is a call to action where there is a valuable free download or something, or there's a freebie, or there's a lesson or a template or something, we want to take action because we're desiring a roadmap or a pathway to understand what to do. So to me, that call to action where it's, here is what we've provided, here's the challenge, here's the approach and what to do next. And therefore, we also have something to help you get started. That's where you could see the conversion, because then I remember the name of the podcast. I feel that there's an immediate need for me to go check out what that freebie is, because I want to continue my learning. So it's contextual, it feels authentic, and I'm ready to go. So that's kind of the instances in which I'm looking to then, to be that conversion for the company. Like I want to go.
Yeah. And you said a couple of things, Connie, that I want to really circle in red, because I consider them keywords when it comes to conversion. Well, when it comes to calls to actions, first of all, and then when it comes to conversions, you use the adjective contextual. And I think that we need to keep in mind that whatever is that we offer as next step to the episode needs to be aligned, meaning connected as much as possible with the topic that has been discussed in the episode. So if the episode is about conversions, mentioning a freebie that has to do with starting a YouTube channel may not be that much of a useful next step for listeners unless you talk about conversion. So the context is really important. And then you also discussed, or you use the word pathway. And I think that's very important too, where we need to keep in mind that people don't have the visual dimension when they listen to podcasts. And oftentimes they're multitasking. So when we want to offer them a next step, it's good to let them know what they can expect. In other words, do they need to head over to a specific landing page and fill out a sign-up form? Or do they need to send a text message to a specific number? What happens once they've sent a text message? If they need to visit a page, what is the link of that page? I think these are important things to keep in mind. Now, there is one principle that it's called the 3 yeses principle, and I heard it and learned it from Tom Schwab, who is the founder of Interview Valet and the author of Podcast Guest Profits. And I'm curious, Connie, have you heard of the 3 yeses principle before?
I actually haven't, so I'm curious to learn about it too.
That it's very, very valuable, and he discusses it in the book from the podcast guesting perspective, but the same applies to you if you're hosting a podcast. It applies even if you create other forms of content and you would like people to go to a specific web page. And the principle revolves around the big mistake that often podcast hosts and podcast guests make, and is this: if I'm getting interviewed by you, Connie, and I want people to, let's say, sign up for a consulting call with me. If I just say, go and visit my homepage and you'll find a sign up form there, just fill it out. That's not a very smart call to action. Why? Because the way my homepage looks today may be different compared to what it looks like next week, 6 months, a year from now. So if the content is evergreen, the content of the episode, and somebody listens to it 6 months from now, and I've redesigned my homepage, they will be like, okay, where is the form he was talking about? So that's not a good thing. The second thing is that sometimes we do things the right way, meaning we direct people toward a page that it's unique, but then we make the mistake of basically trying to say to people, if somebody gets there and it's a warm lead, we say, no, wait a minute, get cold so I can nurture you again. How do we do that? We basically said, go to this landing page, blah, blah, blah. And then we have people who may be ready to book a call to buy from us. But what happens is we offer them a freebie, and then we start to nurture them with an automated email sequence. Because we think what we have learned is that, with the landing pages, there should be one call to action. And the mistake here is that approach comes from the paid advertising or digital advertising world, where it's when we have, for example, a Facebook ads campaign, we are directing cold traffic to the landing page. Whereas with podcasting or podcast guesting, we are directing warm traffic, meaning some of the people who visit the web page we mentioned may still need to be nurtured, and that's okay. Some other people may say, okay, this person did a good job, I want to buy her book. Other people say, you know what, this person really rocked the interview. She said she does coaching, consulting. I want to hire her right now. So by offering them the automated email sequence, we basically say, no, wait, don't hire me just yet. Start from the beginning, and then let's see what happens. So what are your thoughts, Connie, before I continue to share the principle here?
I thought you had a lot of great insights on how many times the level of effort to understand the customer journey. So if we kind of ladder this into how do you make sure you are nurturing and ultimately converting them in the most optimal way, leveraging podcasts is done. And that we could sometimes be a bit too operational in how we think that, we give a call to action and this is generally the flow that we do without really thinking through the context of where they're coming from first and foremost. And whether or not is this, to your point, a warm lead or a cold lead. It's just, it's a lead. We all send them to the same place without thinking through how does that location at the end of the day potentially change over time, or whether it's the right destination to send them to, and ultimately what is sort of that longer term customer journey that they have with us. So I totally agree with you. I think for me, this, again, back to some of the points that we had in earlier videos, you have to be strategic in the way you're thinking through how you are using the medium, one, to educate your audience, deliver value, and then think through that customer experience to build that relationship with you, that prospect. You're building that relationship along the way so that at the end, when they do engage, you've thought through the right way to kind of engage with them and bring them into the fold so you can convert. But many times it becomes so operational and it becomes a volume game, and we're just trying to execute as fast as possible. We don't really take the time to think through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always important to keep in mind that even though as soon as we're done with this episode, we're thinking about the next one, we should think about things long term and keep in mind that, sure, there are people listening to us right now, but there's also people who are going to find out about our podcast next week, next month, 6 months from now, or even longer than that. So we need to make sure as much, obviously, sometimes that can't really happen, but in most cases, we should try to make it as relevant, useful as possible for everybody, regardless of when they consume the content. So now back to these 3 yeses. Why is that an important principle to apply into our corporate podcasting endeavors? The idea is to keep in mind that we are directing warm traffic to a, let's say, landing page. So we want to make sure that we actually have something for 3 types of people or 3 types of segments. The first one is we would offer what Tom Schwab calls a small size yes. What is that? That's a resource that doesn't require a big investment in terms of time nor money. It's something free and something easy to consume. Think of something like a checklist or an email template, something like that the people can download, can use it right away. Perhaps within a few minutes, they already get the win they were trying to get. So that's the small size yes. The mid-size yes, it's something that requires a little bit more time, investment, and it's either free or has a small price tag attached to it. Think about something like a webinar, for example. Typically, webinars don't last 10 minutes or 15 minutes. They may run for 30, 45, 90 minutes. So if you compare downloading a checklist or an email template versus watching a webinar or digital workshop, you understand the difference. I said it can either be free or have a low price tag to it. So if you sell something like a book, or you have a mini course or some templates that you sell, something along those lines, those would be the mid-size yes. So the small yes would be for people who still need to be nurtured, so who still need you to work on the so-called know, like, and trust factor. The mid-size yes, it's for people who have already been interested in what you do, and perhaps they're ready to invest a little bit of money, but they aren't ready to invest the big bucks. And then we have the third and final yes, which is the big size yes. And that's where you have your premium offer. It may be consulting that you sell, a consulting package. It could be coaching. It could be, I don't know, a premium mastermind, whatever it's relevant. So whenever possible, always try to keep these 3 yeses in mind. And when you direct listeners of a podcast, whether it's your own or you're a guest, so you're directing somebody else's audience toward that landing page, always try to keep in mind the small, the mid, and the big size yes, so that if there is somebody who's ready to hire you right there and then, they don't need to first go and download your free checklist and then maybe go on your website and find a way to reach out to you, and maybe they don't find it easily, and then maybe they get frustrated and they find somebody else, and that's an opportunity that is missed. So Connie, what are your to wrap things up, what are your final thoughts about this small, mid, and big size yes? Do you think it's something that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. I summarize this as what's the level of effort, which is a common term, as a lot of people, you guys know, in this or that business world. What is the level of effort that this listener has to take to engage with you or your content? And we all know that a lot of people don't want to do a lot of work. They don't want to be sold. So if you're able to have that small yes be something in which they see immediate value, and that can help nurture them so that they can build this trust in the value that you've just provided in this document, it's great. Or that checklist or what have you. But I do love this sort of sequence of sort of building towards this different level of engagement with you, such that you understand the value that you're delivering at the end to them. And they also see the value that they're getting from you. So I think it's actually a really great approach, and not one where it's salesy and transactional, because I think many of us have experienced really the opposite end, which is all right, we just did this podcast and come hit me up. Like, let's do a deal, like sign up and spend time with me. And what happens is that call becomes one where they're selling you. That's not what we want.
Yeah.
We just want to learn as much as we can, feel like we can trust this person that we're going to have an engagement with. And then over time, determine if they're the right fit for us. And so by having all these wonderful, like again, small, medium, large size yeses, you're increasing your likelihood to ultimately build that longer term relationship and hopefully win an engagement out of it.
Yeah, no, those are very good comments you made, Connie. And actually, I just remember something that it's worth spending 1 or 2 minutes at the most talking about it, because somebody may say, well, how do we actually track whether this is working or not? Well, at the moment with podcasting, we can't really tie downloads with those kind of conversions because people use different devices, different apps, and things like that. However, there is something you can do. You can use a tool like Bitly, for example, Bitly, Bitly. There is one that I use and like, it's called Jot URL. So that's JOT URL. And there are other tools that enable you to create a link that it's customized, it's short, it's easy to remember, and can also be tracked. So you can see how many people have clicked on that link. So if you only share that link on podcasts, then you can be not 100%, well, the data you get is not 100% accurate, because if you always share that call to action, you won't be able to say, was it from podcast guest interview 1 or podcast guest interview 2? But overall, you'll be able to say, from my podcast guesting interviews, I have generated X number of downloads for the freebie, or I've sold X copies of my book, or I've gotten X number of coaching clients that have purchased the coaching package on the page I mentioned. So that's the first thing. The second thing, you may ask yourself, when is it a good time to share the call to action? And here's what my recommendation. If what you share or are going to share, it's something that makes sense because it's connected to the episode, you can start to bring it up already during the conversation, whether you're the host or the guest. So if you are discussing something and one of the resources you have on the page is connected to that, even if you are maybe at the halfway mark of the episode, you can say, and actually, it's funny, Connie, you asked me that, because not what I shared here was just a quick tip, but I have this checklist where I've listed that tip plus 5 other tips, and people can get it for free if they go to whatever the link is. So try to share your call to action toward the end of the episode, but keep in mind that not everybody listens to each episode until the very last second. So if you can have it seamlessly in a spontaneous way throughout the conversation, mention it one time or a couple of times, that's great. And the final thing I would say is, if you're the guest, always make sure that before you record, you ask the host if it's okay that you mention the link to a landing page, Facebook group, whatever asset you want to direct people towards. So these are the final things I would add when it comes to lead generation and converting listeners into subscribers, into community members, and even paying clients.
Great insight, Yann. And for those of you who would like any more information on corporate podcasting and also how to leverage corporate podcasting to drive leads, you can go to flywheelassociates.com/podcasting.